Okay, so a lot of creators that I know in the action camera and travel space still use the traditional GoPros. I mean, I know because I was one of them. For years, I stuck with one brand and didn't deviate whatsoever. And although I was quite young, I could see the benefits of doing so. GoPro is an incredible brand, and now we have companies like DJI coming in, and even Insta360 with traditional action cameras. And they're still fantastic. But as of 3 years ago now, I made one important decision with my content creation and filmmaking. I ditched regular action cameras. I did away with them and replaced them with one of these. What I have here is a 360-degree action camera, which are a bit more expensive on the market when compared to traditional ones, but offer you a lot more freedom in certain ways. And I've traveled all over the globe with this over the last couple of years, filming all sorts of activities, adventures, locations, and capturing loads of angles that I wouldn't be able to do with a traditional action camera. I left GoPro behind, I left normal DJI and even Insta360 one lens cameras behind and stuck with only a 360-degree camera and a DSLR for my filmmaking. So what difference did it make? What positives have I found? What negatives have I found? Because there definitely are some on both sides. And can these really replace traditional action cameras in the year of 2025? Well, let's find out. Let's break down the pros and cons of using a 360-degree camera alone without a traditional action camera. And today's video, I'll be focusing mostly on the Insta360 X5 and the previous camera that I used in this lineup, which was the X3. The main difference being this can shoot in 8.7K, the X3 was 5.6, and this also has replaceable lenses, which is a massive plus, and is a little bit more bulky, with a new mounting system on the bottom. However, my observations from this video will carry over to basically all action cameras on the market today, so I hope you'll find them interesting. So let's dive in, shall we? So I've traveled all the way from Iceland to Japan to Spain to Belgium and used my 360 camera for basically all of these trips. And there are many pros and cons, but the first one I want to talk about in the pros category is the huge field of view for 360 cameras. For more action sport oriented activities and for POV shots, having a massive field of view can really make it feel like there's a lot of speed in whatever you're doing. For example, karting, it is fantastic to use for. And for POV shots, you can really feel like you're in that moment. You've got that wide field of view with the peripherals that you would have in real life, and you just can't get that with a normal action camera as wide as you can with the 360. It also means that in post you can adjust that field of view depending on how wide you want it. You don't have to pick it on the day. You can go into software and widen it or tighten it up a little bit if you want to do so. I absolutely love this, and getting the perfect shot is so easy. Each 360 camera has its own software, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in the cons section, but they will allow you to adjust everything in post, so you don't have to worry. That brings us into my second pro of 360 cameras, is that you are very flexible in how you shoot. Again, this could be a con to some people, and I will tackle that in a bit, but the fact that I can reframe anywhere in post because of the two lenses is such a game changer. And because of the way the stitch line works, you can get an invisible selfie stick angle of yourself as if you had another cameraman with you. It's great for solo shooting, and you can reframe these shots however you want. You don't really have to worry about angle, all you need to worry about is positioning. This also carries over to being able to re-edit the same shot multiple times. For example, again, in karting, if I'm in a battle, I can have my POV front showing the lines that I'm taking, and also cut back and intersplice with my rear POV, tracking the driver who's trying to get past me. This is applicable to so many different areas and will capture different angles that maybe you missed on the day, but in post you can render out multiple angles and not have to have two cameras facing each way. It can really save you in certain situations, including on actual professional shoots. If you're doing behind the scenes and you don't manage to capture an angle with your main DSLR, your 360 camera will have seen it if it's rolling. And honestly, this is the main draw of using a 360 camera for me, and it's something that I can't state enough. The freedom that you feel and the fact that you can look at the subject that you're experiencing with your own eyes, knowing that the camera is going to capture it, is a very freeing feeling, especially when you're traveling, where you want to be seeing things for yourself rather than through a monitor or a viewfinder all of the time. That is the biggest pro out of 360 cameras for me, is that free feeling. It allows you to be creative, get cool shots, and especially with the accessories that you can use, the different mounts to get POV shots or aerial shots, with the stitch line taking away the selfie stick, so you can get faux drone shots. There's a lot you can have fun with here, but the main thing is that freeing feeling and the fact that you know that you're covered no matter what. 360 cameras I've also found to be a lifesaver in countries that don't really allow drones. In a lot of spots in Japan, for example, I couldn't fly a drone, but I could get some overhead shots with a 360 because it's not a flying object. You're good. If you're heading to places like Iceland as well, I've been a couple of times, and most of the big tourist spots there don't allow drones to be flown, so a 360 camera can really save your life. If you want those proper faux drone shots though, you'll want to get a very long selfie stick, like a 3 meter. And if there's high wind, then it's going to be moving about and not look quite right. But the stabilization, for the most part, is great on these cameras, so you'll be okay. That's why I've absolutely loved using 360 cams over the last couple of years. However, let's now talk about the pitfalls that they have, because there are a few, and they're pretty major for some people. One thing which might be a pitfall for you, or it might be something that you enjoy, in my case, is the editing workflow. If you just enjoy shooting something with your action camera, putting it onto your timeline and editing it there, then you're not going to enjoy the 360 workflow. It adds another piece of software into the mix. You can do it within software like the Final Cut and DaVinci plugins, but the easiest way is to load up the actual software that your camera relies on, whether it's the DJI software or it's the Insta360 software, and you're going to have to go and reframe your shots every single time, unless you shoot in the one lens mode, which these cameras do usually have. But at that point, you might as well just get a normal action camera because it's doing the same thing, but for more money. If you enjoy editing and like messing about with angles, then you're better off going with a normal action camera and streamlining that workflow. We've also got to talk about resolution because it is lower than normal single lens action cameras. Capturing 360 degrees is 8.7K for most modern 360 cameras like the X5 that I own. However, when cropping in, which you have to do because you can't use the full sphere, you end up with fewer pixels than that. And your resolution can bounce anywhere from 1080p to 3 to 4K. Now we're getting to the point where the quality is comparable to the highest end GoPros and DJI cameras, where the 360 cameras do look great, especially with the larger sensors that we have now, but they're not quite there, especially on a large screen. If you blow it up on a projector or a big 4K TV, you're gonna notice the difference if you pixel peep. If you're shooting for socials though on phones, you're gonna look completely fine. These cameras aren't quite as rugged as well, and the form factor is different. You're going to be looking at a taller form factor for most 360 cameras compared to traditional action cameras, especially with the offerings we now get from Insta360, for example, with the Go 3S and Go Ultra and the DJI Osmo Nano. These cameras are very small and they're really good for POV stuff because you don't really notice them. 360 cameras are pretty big. They're quite long as well. And of course you have a lens on both sides, and for some of these you don't get to replace them. So if you scratch them, you have to send them back to the manufacturer. That's one thing I love about the X5 itself, is that I can replace the lenses. They are easily replaced. But for the Osmo 360, for example, by DJI, that doesn't have replaceable lenses. If you scratch them, you gotta send it back to the manufacturer, which is quite annoying, if I do say so myself. Some people have also said that the Insta360 cameras don't have great weather sealing and waterproofing. I've never found any issue with them. I've taken them underwater and they've been completely fine, but that's something that people do bring up. Another con for 360 cameras is that if you are doing underwater videography, you're gonna need a dive case. Water refracts differently to normal air, so you're gonna get a weird stitch line if you don't use a dive case and enable the dive case setting on your 360 cam. It's not gonna stitch properly, it's gonna look awful, and it's something that is mandatory to have if you're gonna shoot underwater. However, I do think that 360 cameras offer maybe the best views in underwater shots if you are using a dive case, if you go that extra mile, which is a plus there, but you do need to get that extra bit of kit. It is mandatory for that sort of shooting. You can't just jump in like you can with a normal action camera and get those underwater shots in 360 degrees. Again, if you're going with a single lens mode, you can, but if you're trying that 360 shot, you need a dive case. 360 cameras are also more expensive. You're going to be looking at $400 to $500 for a 360 offering, compared to as low as $150 to $200 for some traditional action cameras, which will give you as good of an image, albeit not with the 360 features. I've also got to mention color space, because some of the 360 cameras, the X5 for example, don't allow you to shoot in log if you're shooting in 8.7K. It's a bit unfortunate. I just shoot in Rec 709 with their own Vivid LUT on, and it does look really good. And you are locked to 30 FPS maximum at 8.7K, so there's a bit of a restriction there for the highest image quality. It's not the end of the world, but the biggest problem that I've had with that has been on client shoots where I've shot in log on other cameras, but tried to get the highest image quality on the Insta360, but had to shoot in a set LUT. So color grading has been a bit more difficult with the correction, and if a client wanted a specific change in the grade, it was a lot harder to get there with the 360 footage. Penultimately, let's talk file size, because that is a big difference here. You're going to need more space for 360 videos. When you're recording in 8.7K, you're taking up a much larger file size than, say, a 4K recording on a normal one-lens action camera. You're getting the data from both lenses with a 360 cam, so naturally, it's going to be double the size. That is definitely something to consider if you travel light, don't have a lot of storage, maybe don't own many SSDs or large SD cards, and you don't want to take up a load of storage, then maybe go for a traditional action cam. And finally, I want to talk about low light shooting, because it's something that is changing in the current 360 market, but traditional action cameras do still have them beat in my opinion. Because of the sensor sizes of normal action cams and the processing required for it, they do end up with better low light performance than 360 cameras. We do have modes like pure video on the Insta360 X5, but it still isn't quite as good as the low light performance from the Osmo series or the GoPro Hero series in my opinion. And if you do a lot of low light shooting, then you're probably going to be better off with an action camera. For me though, I don't do that much, and when I do, it's usually sparingly, so I'm okay with the 360 offering. Overall, those are my main thoughts on action cameras versus 360 cameras. I've been using both for many years, and I've got to be honest, despite the cons that 360 cameras do have, I've not felt that I've really missed traditional action cameras since picking up a 360 for the first time and not looking back. I don't really do much underwater content, so I don't really feel that issue with the refraction and needing a dive case. POV shots, despite the camera being bulkier, is still solid, and the fact that the mounting system is now magnetically clamped on the newer models like the X5 means I can quickly bounce between different attachment points like you can with normal action cameras, and I find that the editing workflow is fun for me. It's something that I enjoy and not something that I loathe, but that will be a personal preference, of course. Ultimately though, just having the freedom to pick my shot after the fact and getting shots of myself while traveling without the need for a second videographer is a real game changer, and some of the shots that you really can get can be so creative. It does open up your creative possibilities, so I definitely recommend taking a look. I hope this has been helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.